All right, everybody, welcome to another episode of the Subnet Show. I am your host, Gabriel Cardona. We're coming to you audio only today from the beautiful city of Lisbon, Portugal. We are out here for the recent ETH Week or Lisbon Blockchain Week, and I am joined, as always, by the man with the most cats in crypto, my co-host, Connor Daly. What is up, Connor?
I miss my cats. I haven't played with any cats in the last few days, so man, it's been an experience. But man, Lisbon, beautiful city. Amazing conference. We've been at Avalanche House all week and met so many amazing community members, builders, investors, degens, enterprise people, legal, lobbyists, and man, it has been an experience. And one of those community members that we met is here with us today.
So yes, we are joined today by Galen Marchetti. Let me know if I didn't pronounce that correctly. Galen is the co-founder and CEO of Kurtosis, and Kurtosis is a testing and prototyping environment for blockchain technology. They're pretty blockchain agnostic. Currently, they work with obviously Avalanche, Solana, Chainlink, I believe Near. He can announce some others. But yeah, it's great to have you today, Galen. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, it's a real pleasure. Thanks for having me and taking me to this nice hotel to do this podcast. It's great. Pleasure to be. And the Avalanche House was great as well. I was there the last couple of days. Great to meet everyone.
Successful.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about your LizCon journey. You know, what events did you do? You know, what was your networking like? Your whole experience. Would you recommend people come? You know, with just the quick spiel.
Yeah. So the Lisbon experience for me. We were invited to speak at the Near conference. We're currently working with the Near protocol, and that was the main reason for coming. I came about a week early and just so happened to learn via Jay from Avalanche that there was an Avalanche event happening, and then I learned about everything else, like that there's a big Ethereum event, like a lot of blockchain folks here. So for me, I just kind of threw myself into it and tried to meet as many people as possible. Because my main focus was speaking with the Near protocol.
Yeah. So I will say I might not sound like my normal self today because we have all been talking to a lot of people, and I have definitely lost my voice multiple times and come back to life with it. So all part of the experience. Yeah, I gotta say this was an absolutely incredible week for us, and we got to meet so many amazing people and got to hear about why they were interested in Avalanche and talk to a bunch of people who had never heard of Avalanche or were not sure why Avalanche was something that they should be interested in. And getting to talk to those people was, I think, a real great experience all around. Great for us to get to know the community better, and also great for them to see what kind of community that we're building, which is a very real community. And if you have any FOMO, if you missed Avalanche House, if you missed Lisbon, and you want to participate in the future, this was a very successful event for us, so I think there's a very strong chance there will be more Avalanche houses in the future.
Yeah, it was very eye-opening getting to connect with the community. We had what was called Avalanche House, and it was absolutely a huge success. Every single day we had presentations, and of course we had food and beverages, and we made a big announcement of a partnership with Andretti Formula E Racing, and that was very exciting. And then also just got to speak to a bunch of cool projects, including who was all there. We got Benki, we had Wonderland, we had
Ave, Marker, a bunch of Twitter personalities too. We got to meet a lot of the folks from Avalanche Twitter.
Some Pangolin team members were here. So in the context of Kurtosis, we're huge fans of Kurtosis at Ava Labs. We use it extensively internally for testing, and traditionally, Kurtosis was used for testing, but I know there's now a prototyping framework, which we want Galen to speak on. But I know the way I perceive Kurtosis and the way we've used it internally is to mock up end-to-end tests, so you can actually spin up an entire new Docker container with a full Avalanche network and run every single individual test on it. And you can, of course, script the environment to get the environment in whatever state you want. You can inject malicious behavior into your test suite, so you can test the robustness of your test and your code. And then you can also inject different network failures into your test suite, so you can see what your code does, because we're developing decentralized applications. So without falling down the rabbit hole too far, usually the way we do this is we ask people their crypto journey, their crypto vision, and then the project they're working on. So as Connor mentioned, most of us have a very similar story. So without falling down the rabbit hole, why don't you just kind of give us the high level of your crypto journey? If I understand correctly, you were doing physics at Cornell. Is that right?
That's right. I majored in physics at Cornell. I originally wanted to be a research physicist.
What year did you graduate?
2015.
Okay, we overlapped.
Oh, really?
I was a physics major at Cornell for 2 years.
No
that's
way.
awesome.
I graduated in 2016.
That's
Were
so
you in the
cool.
engineering or the
I was in,
arts and sciences?
arts.
Me too.
We definitely
Holy-
probably ran into each other a long time ago.
Wow. So 2 years?
Yeah, so I ended up switching to CS my junior year. But yeah, I worked in the accelerator physics lab for a while.
No way.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, so I after 2 years, what I didn't switch out, but I added the computer science major because maybe for the same reason you did, which is like I saw what life as an academic was like, and I was like, let's call this right now. Like let's switch.
That was my experience too. Is like I worked in the particle physics lab too, and when I moved to the particle physics lab, our postdoc who had just spent the last 8 years of his life or whatever it was doing his physics PhD was now going to work at Seagate to do hard drive stuff, and just everybody there was just ending up working in software eventually. And so I thought if I get my physics PhD, I'll end up working at Facebook doing software anyway, so might as well learn the actual parts of computer science that are useful, so I don't have to backdoor my way in and can just choose my own path.
Many such stories. This is that's exactly the motivations that I had as well. Did you take classes with Goon?
I did, yeah.
Yeah.
He was my research advisor when I was at Cornell, and so
nice.
I did a Bitcoin project with him back in 2014.
Oh, okay, cool. I was so Goon taught my operating systems class. Kevin Siknicki was one of the TAs during that class.
Nice.
The year after, I took a grad course in distributed systems, and my crypto journey actually started there in that course. I was messing around with the Ethereum code base. It was before they had released the initial Genesis block, and I didn't know what I was doing. I was like, never had industry experience in building any kind of software. But the goal of that project was to actually build the proof of stake implementation of Ethereum back then. Didn't get very far, but I did complete the project at least. I did get a grade on it. That allowed me to pass the class.
Didn't Vitalik come through and you get introduced by Goon at that same time?
Yeah, probably. I remember back in the day, Vitalik came through about the week before Ethereum launched. Because Goon was has been the preeminent crypto professor for a long time, and I think Vitalik wanted to chat with him about some Ethereum stuff. And so he gave a talk to the CS department, and were able to do one-on-one meetings with him. And so I showed him the Bitcoin project I was working on, and he demoed smart contracts for me. And Serpent was the language he used at the time, which is now a dead language, but it totally went over my head. I didn't get it.
Me neither. Only very, very high level. But yeah, I mean, Goon was actually one of the main reasons for getting more seriously into crypto later, because of the work he was doing at Cornell. I really respected the way he was thinking about the space, and when I heard that he was seriously working on a project building a blockchain network, it was now there's some legitimacy in the technology that I want to get behind. I know, this is from a skeptic, from someone who hadn't been very involved, but him diving into the space was my indication to
nice.
dive in as well.
Sure.
So how did you get from graduating at Cornell to actually being at Kurtosis, or what was your next step?
So after Cornell, I went and worked at Palantir for. I was there for 5.5 years.
Nice.
I was a software engineer with them, but I was part of the business development department. So I was in New York for a year, and then they sent me abroad, and I worked in the international business development department. So I went to Abu Dhabi and worked there for a year, and that's where I met my co-founder. We worked together in Abu Dhabi, then we both came to Brazil, built out the Brazilian presence, and it was actually, we were living in the same apartment together when the pandemic happened. Lockdown started, and me and him started looking at doing some more work to fill our free time that we had, and that's where Kurtosis started coming into the equation.
Okay. And what does Kurtosis mean? Where does the name come from?
Oh yeah, so Kurtosis started through Avalanche. So Avalanche had a grant program before the mainnet launch, and they were advertising they wanted to have someone build an end-to-end testing platform, and we knew how to do that because we had built similar things in our past. So when we applied, we named the team Kurtosis Was Framed, and so Kurtosis is the kind of measures like the thickness of the long tails of a distribution, okay. A statistical distribution, and it kind of means like how frequently do rare events actually happen. And if you misjudge the kurtosis of a distribution, then things that you thought were rare are actually far more common.
Gotcha.
And so the principle behind the end-to-end testing framework was, well, people hit bugs when they put their code into production, and the philosophy they might have is, well, it worked in my component, so who could have expected this? And that's kind of like framing the kurtosis of your expectations. It's like, no, you should have been catching this stuff before if you had an end-to-end test. So that's the motivation for the word kurtosis, and then eventually that kurtosis was framed got shortened for the business to just kurtosis.
That's a good name. I like it. Yeah, so you started out with Avalanche, and so I guess could you give like just a quick description? So you talked about testing. So what does it mean to do this end-to-end testing for people who aren't really super familiar with the dev process?
Right. The way that a lot of dev processes work, even in traditional software, is developers write and test either small components of their code or kind of like medium-sized chunks individually, and then the entire system only gets all put together in a shared staging environment or QA environment where people play with it, and then it goes into production, which means that there's no actual robust testing at the level of the entire system. And this is almost how everyone does it. And the kind of the philosophy of Kurtosis when it comes to the testing is that we should be testing the entire system as a unit in a way more robust and reproducible way. You can almost think of it as putting an airplane through a wind tunnel. Like, that's extremely valuable to do, rather than just like taking off of the runway and then like seeing if it worked. Yeah. And a lot of software kind of just takes off on the runway and then you try to fix it in the air.
Or you only tested the wheels, and then you test the wheels separately, and then you test the wings separately, but you never test the whole thing all together.
Right, exactly. And kind of what's happening in software, at least from our point of view, is that container orchestration frameworks, these are the things like Kubernetes or even like what Docker is building, they're making it a lot easier to manage a distributed system as a whole. But it's being applied by the industry in production environments because that's what it's optimized for, and that's the most important thing to work on right now. But if you could take those systems and apply it to the testing and development process, then you completely revolutionize like how that DevOps cycle works, and that's kind of the category that we're operating in.
Got it.
Yeah. So you did a little demo for us the other day, and I actually have not used Kurtosis at Avalanche, so I don't really work on the core platform. I work on more of the dApp side. But what was extremely powerful, which I think the way we actually do use this is we're able to use Kurtosis to spin up basically a mini Avalanche network with a bunch of different nodes, because we don't want to test just one Avalanche Go node. We want to test what happens when there's a bunch of different validators working in the system and trying to see how the system operates when maybe one validator is malicious or something like that, or is not responding. And just it's so powerful to have these different nodes, and being able to write your tests in a way that you can kind of just script them up and write what you want those tests to do in a single file or something like that, rather than having to write scripts on 5 different boxes and then trying to get them to communicate. It's very hard to do in a repeatable manner, so that you can just kind of let your tests run whenever you write new code and see how it performs, make sure you didn't break anything. And so I'm super impressed by it. I want to see if I can include it in more parts of our workflows, because this seemed really impressive. So I guess one thing I wanted to ask is, you're very much focused on the blockchain space right now. Have you thought about moving to more general decentralized systems, or I guess what's your focus there?
Yeah, we have, and in fact, right after the Avalanche engagement, the way that we approached kind of our business development was we spoke to a lot of different people. So we spoke to people who are building microservice architectures like traditional software, people who are building like Internet of Things systems, even like satellite cluster configurations, telecom folks, anyone building software-defined networks, and the need exists in all of these different situations. It's just that the feature set that is the most important to build at first changes. So like, in like a traditional software platform, you have one institution that runs the production environment, so they're like the dictators of what that looks like. But in blockchain, it's fundamentally decentralized, right? So like that doesn't exist at all.
Yeah.
So really, it's blockchain is the most active, interesting, and engaging market where I think we can make the biggest impact right now. But the applications of the platform we're building go beyond that. It's just that we've decided to optimize the developer experience and the folks that we support to be entirely inside of the blockchain space.
Yeah. You're one of the few people I know that's actually building tools for core blockchain platform developers. I think a lot of the tooling in the space right now is for dApp developers. It's trying to figure out new ways to write smart contracts efficiently, new ways to deploy contracts to Avalanche, Ethereum, whatever. So it's cool to actually meet some people working on the other side, working for the platform folks, because I think that's probably a pretty underserved market right now.
Yeah, it's definitely a situation where we feel lucky, just because I have a lot of friends who are also starting businesses right now, and the idea of like being somewhere where you don't feel like there's a immediate competitor doing what you're doing is like it feels good. Like we have some space to actually focus on the innovation we're doing instead of battling someone, which is great. So yeah, and it's great to work with the infrastructure level platforms. Because you get the broadest exposure to all the cool stuff happening on top of those.
Yeah, so I know you guys have been working on your testing framework or environment. I think you told me when we were chatting the other day, your team is 3 people right now, is that correct?
Yeah, there's 3 people. We hired our first engineer a couple of months ago.
Got it. So you guys are your output is absolutely amazing because the Kurtosis framework is great and we use it a ton internally. And as I mentioned, I know Solana and Near and Chainlink also. But something you demoed for us the other day at Avalanche House is a new prototyping environment. And so I wanted to kind of touch on that. Why don't you bring us up to speed on what's happening there?
Yeah, so this is something that the prototyping workflow is something we first started envisioning while we were working with you guys the first time. And kind of the idea is if you have a robust end-to-end testing engine, then if you just detach the environment spin up from the execution of the tests, then you can give developers a very nice experience for prototyping because you can leave the environment there and separate like the lifecycle management from the actual interactions. And the reason this is really important is one, for being the developer experience when it comes to writing tests is a lot better if you can prototype while you're developing the test. And 2, well, it's great for developing other features as well. So this is where we start to even touch into working with folks who are like dApp developers because, for example, what we have for the Near module is with Kurtosis, you get one button click to spin up like a Near node, a wallet, an explorer. There's an indexer database that the index is in the node, but like it writes to that database. You have a couple front ends that allow you to explore your own local state. So you kind of have a complete environment that is local to just you and private to just you. So there's a lot of cool stuff you can do there, especially if you're building auxiliary services or like microservices that interact with various blockchains. The modules, so I use this word module, that's kind of the unit of shareability in Kurtosis. So in order to get a Near environment, you have a Kurtosis module that is defined for Near. And if we had that for Avalanche, it would be an Avalanche module, and those modules are composable. So there's a lot of cool stuff you start to be able to do where you can chain together a bunch of different blockchains and supporting services that give you the full development experience you need to have a smooth prototyping workflow.
Got it. And so right now, whenever you spin up a development environment, there's just so many different components that you don't get out of the box. So like when you're dealing with Avalanche, you spin up a Vosh That's like our version of Ganache, or if you're on Ethereum, you have Ganache, and that gives you like your local blockchain. But as he mentioned, you don't have an explorer, you don't have really a wallet, you don't have an indexer, so you've got to do something like Covalent or Graph. There's just a lot of components that you don't get out of the box. So this is kind of like a one-stop shop, single click of a button to spin up all of those components together, correct?
That's right. And then there is an extra notion on top of that of like parameterization. So when you start up a module, you can set different parameters that are useful for you. So like one simple parameter is just specifying which services you want to whitelist or blacklist from your environment. But it can get more complex where you can set like different mining configurations for the nodes in the network, or like you can spoon different amounts of state from the testnet or mainnet that you want to work off of.
Okay.
So there's a lot of kind of one button click utilities you can give to developers depending on what the needs are for that specific ecosystem or like set of use cases.
Got it. And you showed me an example, I believe, in TypeScript. It was just like an interface you have to implement. What other languages are supported? What does it look like from a dev perspective?
Right. So the Kurtosis engine exposes a protobuf API, and then we have implementations in TypeScript and Golang, which are the two languages right now that developers can use to interact with Kurtosis. But because it's organized that way, we have the ability to implement more and more languages. It's kind of like, like you guys have like Avalanche JS, but you could easily have like a Rust one if you wanted,
sure.
right?
Yeah.
It's just like, which ones do you support?
Protobuf's a really cool piece of software if any of you haven't tried it. It's basically a language agnostic protocol for moving, sending messages between languages and encoding your data. So you can have a Java class on one side and then encode it and then decode it into a C++ class or into a Golang struct or something like that. So I think that's why you can do that extensibility and you can keep adding new languages in the future, right?
Exactly. It's kind of like you can compose, like if you're in the Java ecosystem, you have to take code that other Java developers wrote, but with the protobufs, you can compose libraries across languages. And then you can think of the Kurtosis module system as actually composing like distributed systems across.
Wow.
Is that kind of how it is, right? So like the end vision of those modules is that you can do a lot of cool stuff where not just like deploy different services like Avalanche with Solana in the same testnet or prototyping environment, but also you could inject behavior that modifies those systems. So you could have like a Chaos Monkey module, which like you pull in and it breaks the network across your entire thing in random spots.
Sure.
So there's like logical things you can do to the network as well, or induce like split chain scenarios in the blockchains you're working with and then heal them. The potential is like pretty cool. Like we're excited about that.
Sure.
Yeah.
And so I think I probably asked a couple of these questions of you already, but we'll do it again just because we're online here. So where do you sort of see this growing? So if I were I'm on the outside, so looking from the outside in, I would say if I were working at a huge company, let's say Facebook, for example, and we're building out the DM network or Libra, which used to be called, which I'll go ahead and plug Ted Yin. Ted Yin created Hot Stuff, which is the classical consensus protocol behind Libra. I always like to plug that. Ted's one of our co-founders. So if I were building that team and I were looking out, one of the things I learned in I live in San Francisco, so I've been working in Silicon Valley for a long time. And it's this, I think the canonical example is, why did Facebook acquire Instagram when Instagram was like 13 months old with 11 people for $1 billion or something? The reason they did that is because Mark Zuckerberg realized he could own this company or he could compete with this company in 5 years. And having seen the meteoric rise of Facebook, he appreciated that like these guys could be us tomorrow. And so if I were working at a large company and I were putting together the components to build out a huge blockchain infrastructure ecosystem, I would spot your team. I would say, these are 3 guys, let's go acquire them. So in your vision, what is the ultimate long-term outcome that would make you happy? Are you guys looking to be acquired? Are you looking to grow and become like the next huge thing? Like, where do you see this ultimately playing out? Or where would you like to see it play out?
So our kind of 10-year goal for where Kurtosis could be is actually like the development suite for distributed systems.
Gotcha.
So it's much broader than that. We really, like, how cool would it be if you could test upgrades to the New York City subway system like on Kurtosis? Like, and that's kind of a thing. And the reason that's so exciting is because when, as an engineer, I hear how like the New York City subway system is actually doing their upgrades, and I'm like, oh my god, like this could be so much better.
Sure.
So that is the end goal. We have a long-term vision for where this can go.
Got it. So you guys want to grow the company. You're not looking to get acquired or anything like that.
No.
Got it. And so you had mentioned, so I guess sort of two things from there. Are you guys hiring? And if so, what are you looking for? And then the other one you had mentioned, you really just want to get feedback from users. So the number one thing you're looking for right now is just to get the feedback from people, see how they're using Kurtosis, if they're not using Kurtosis, why. So what are some asks you would ask with regards to potential, we're trying to hire this role, and or just from the community? What are you looking for?
Yeah, so we are hiring right now, and the biggest thing that we're looking for is we're hiring for a developer relations role, but particularly with regards to developer experience.
Sure.
So this is kind of like a very product-focused developer relations person, and it would be great to find someone with experience in the blockchain space, because it is very new and different. There's a lot to learn with regards, it's a humongous space, and there's a lot to learn with that. And both my co-founder and I started now we understand a lot more than we did before, but we started out as outsiders, and it would be great to bring on some experience from people who have been in the space for a long time. The other role that we're really looking for is developer evangelist. So this is like more of a marketing role in the same kind of category.
Sure.
My co-founder and I are both engineers, so I'm kind of talking about the more social go-to-market roles as opposed to like the hard technical stuff. And the final thing is, our like number one goal right now is having developers love the experience of using Kurtosis. So like the biggest thing I would ask is if there's any developers out there to go to the Kurtosis website, kurtosistech.com, and try out our onboarding experience and reach out to us. Our contacts are information is on there, and we'll set up a meeting with the founders and talk about what was it like, did it suck, was it fun, do you see uses for it, or do you see that it has major limitations? Like we're all about that developer feedback right now.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm just, first of all, Gabriel, you're not allowed to leave.
Don't worry, I'm here. Ain't going nowhere.
So second of all, I think your long-term vision makes so much sense to me, because I think that you're very focused on blockchain now, but like I said earlier, like when it comes to distributed systems, like this is what every major company in the world is doing right now. Like for Web 2 and Web 3. Uber, Lyft, Netflix, all these services are built using distributed systems. Like you would be like the ultimate AWS service or whatever.
Yeah, I was saying blockchain as a service, not to interrupt you, but on Twitter I was tweeting blockchain as a service, and Tyler, Tcrypt, who recently left our team but is an absolute block star, hit me back and was like, Kurtosis is blockchain as a service. So yeah, it is the ultimate AWS for distributed systems. That's a great way to think about it.
And just the way, if you think about having all of these like different orchestration frameworks and stuff like that, and being able to actually use them together in a testable way that's not just deployment to production, I think it's so powerful. Yeah, and I'm a believer now. I'm convinced.
Yeah, so can you speak at all just about Avalanche? I know you guys have worked with other blockchains, but as you mentioned, so did the company start with a grant from the Avalanche Foundation? Is that literally the beginning of it? So Avalanche was the very first project.
Yes, Avalanche was the very first project. We started with a grant from the Avalanche Foundation, specifying the end-to-end testing use case, and it was a great fit because I had a personal connection through my Cornell experience with Goon and Sikniki, so I trusted the team from the top, and we worked with Colin and the engineers, and
Aaron,
we connected Aaron, Steven, and Tyler, and the they're just great engineers, and like coming from Palantir, like you can feel the connection when you're like, oh, I see the talent there. So there was really, really great cohesion between the Kurtosis team and Avalanche from the very beginning. So brilliant partners when it came to building out the first thing and like getting it into meaningful usage. And that's kind of the thing, is that Avalanche really valued the robustness of the DevOps pipeline and the stability of what they were building. So I guess it would be really easy, and I've seen this before in other companies. Like it would be really easy to over optimize for like a short term win, right? But sacrifice quality of the product you're delivering, and that's Kurtosis as a testing framework is designed for the long term, right? The long term value you get out of it. And Avalanche had the same vision.
Yeah, that's definitely something that we think about all the time. I think one thing a lot of people will say about us is that we don't do enough marketing or whatever. We're not ready to we didn't go full speed in pushing the product and selling it as quickly as we could have. And I think one of the big reasons for that is that we know that when we make big claims that we can be a scalable blockchain, we can be the most scalable blockchain. We can have all these improvements, we can have subnets. People only trust you once, and you can't mess up. And you can make these short-term optimizations to try to get your business, get your chain in front of other people, get your dApp in front of other people. But if you're not ready, if you don't put in the work, if you don't plan for the long term right away, you're going to make a mistake, and then you're going to lose trust. And so that can just be absolutely killer, because it's so much harder to win that back once you've proven that you've messed up or whatever. So we take that to heart, and we wanted to make sure that with everything we build, we're always planning to do this the right way, no matter how important it is, or how short term or how long term, because the returns for doing something the right way the first time and carrying that practice through the entire development cycle it pays compound dividends going forward, and can help you avoid exponentially bad outcomes.
Yeah, we've done a really good job at Ava Labs. Probably the best. I was at Trulia in 2011, 2012. We went public on the IPO, or on the New York Stock Exchange. We had an IPO, and then we were acquired by Zillow, and it was like a huge $2.5 billion acquisition. And something that I really learned there, and something which has really been driven into me, again, living in San Francisco for the past 10 years and working there with a bunch of great teams, is it's sort of like you have to build everything upon a foundation of extremely high quality engineering. And then above that, you want to have some technical innovation, and then you want to incentivize the team in the right way. And if you can get all of those components playing together well, you can really go big, and you can make a huge impact, and you can be incredibly successful. And I think that's something that Ava Labs has done. I've worked at several blockchain startups, and I think Ava Labs has just really done a great job of putting all the pieces together. We have an incredibly strong foundation of engineering. It starts literally with our CEO and the entire C-suite. John, Ted, Kevin, and Goon are all just quadruple plus level players. They all are, excellent experts in their field. 3 of those 4 are PhDs from Cornell in computer science, and then all the way down the team. So, you mentioned Steven and Aaron and Dan, and we've just had so many different, obviously Connor. We have so many incredibly great engineers at our company. So yeah, I just want to give a shout out there. So in the context of Kurtosis, being a multi-blockchain framework right now, or environment sort of framework, you had mentioned ultimately moving into other areas. How do you decide which technology stacks you want to take on? Is it primarily just grant driven, or do you guys have some checklists that you check off and say we want to go there next? Like, how do you figure out your roadmap?
Yeah, our roadmap, at least for the medium term, I guess you would say, the next year and a half, it's driven by the amount of high quality engagement we get. Okay. So it's about the relationships we can build with the engineers or the organizations that we're working with, because we're in the period of investing deeply into the quality of our product, and you get a foundation that's willing to give a lot of money, but they aren't willing to, or the engineers inside of that organization or the ecosystem just aren't as tied in or motivated to develop, and that would be a low quality engagement for us.
Sure.
So it's really about engineer engagement where we focus our time. So we're looking for ecosystems where there's a lot of people building, and engineers are excited about being able to, improve the process in which they develop. They're motivated to get things out as fast as possible in a safe way, and that's kind of where we would thrive for the foreseeable future.
Okay. And I know you mentioned you're going to be in Lisbon for a little bit longer. This will be going live. Pardon me. This should be going live on the web tomorrow, I think, right?
Probably next week.
Oh, okay. So I was going to give him an opportunity to plug anything else you're doing in town if you want to, and if it makes it out in time, if they hear it.
Got you. Well, I'll be at the NEAR conference Tuesday and Wednesday of this week. then I'll be flying back to Mexico City, which is where my co-founder and I are running Kurtosis from right now. I'll be at the Near conference, and maybe this will go out after I do all that. But I'll be around and open and networking while I'm here for sure.
Got it. And you mentioned you met your co-founder in Abu Dhabi. Is he native to Abu Dhabi, or do you want to give a shout out to your team?
I do, yeah. My co-founder is amazing. His name is Kevin today, and he's actually another Midwest guy. So I'm from Ohio. He's from Illinois, and no, he was working at Palantir as well. Deployed out in Abu Dhabi. That's where I met him. But brilliant engineer. He has the architectural vision for what we're building, and he's got a real mind for seeing long-term consequences of design decisions, whether it's software or business. So I'm kind of like generating chaos by like bringing in like users and new workflows and everything, and he's like trying to take that chaos and turn it into a system that doesn't fall apart, So that's kind of the dynamic between us. And our engineer, Leandro, is really great. He joined us a couple months ago, but he onboarded super fast into the team, and he's already generating new ideas. I'm really grateful to be backed by the team that we have so far, and I hope that as we grow, we keep the culture that we've managed to have up to this point.
Yeah, it still shocks me that there's only 3 people on your team. So what is the title of your co-founder? If you're CEO, what is he?
CTO.
CTO, okay.
CTO.
So in your day, what does your actual day-to-day look like? Like, are you still a code monkey, or are you now just totally detached?
Yeah, Kevin kicked me off of the engineering team a couple months ago. I'm not allowed to code anymore. It's probably a good idea. I was coding a lot up until then, but basically we learned that if I'm coding, then the feedback loop to users dies down. And that's our most important thing, so I'm full-time dedicated to that. We did just raise a fundraising round, so I was fundraising for a little bit, but now that that's over, I'm fully dedicated to finding new users to speak with, and making relationships with blockchain institutions so that we can learn how to support their systems to those users, but the end goal of that is those users.
Got it.
So that's my full focus right now, and hiring. I guess I don't have a lot of free time, so I'm hiring as well, of course, which is part of the job.
Yeah.
So if people want to find you, how do they find you online?
Oh, you can find me. Twitter is Galen Marchetti. That's Galen Marchetti. You can go to our website, kurtosistech.com. That's the best way because you can find all of our socials there.
Sure.
But we're wide open to feedback and interactions, so please do reach out.
Okay. Yeah. So I know, just real quick, for myself, we've been working on Avalanche 2.0, so of course I'm on the developer service or developer relations team or squad at Avalanche. I'm developer evangelist, and we've been already brainstorming on Avalanche 2.0, so I know as soon as I get back, I'm going to be deep diving on the prototyping framework because I really like what he demoed for us the other day. So I know that's my big takeaway from meeting up with you here. It's nice to meet you in person, and I'm a huge fan of Kurtosis, absolutely have been since I joined Avalanche, and so now when I get back to San Francisco, I'm going to deep dive on the prototyping framework, so I'm pretty stoked to dig into that.
So one quick question that I think we're maybe kind of wrapping up a little bit, so I kind of want to end on. What do you think the blockchain development experience is missing right now? What do you see as the key opportunities that maybe Kurtosis is going to move to fill, but maybe some things that you're not going to fill, but you see as the big missing pieces right now? What are the biggest challenges you see?
The biggest pain point is, and we've seen this across every single engagement we've done or tried to do so far, the biggest pain point is that there's no source for how things tie together. That's the biggest pain point, and everyone kind of has to figure it out on their own, and no one is solely responsible for that. And so that's kind of what the Kurtosis module kind of does, that is encode the logic for how those things tie together. And that's the biggest pain point for the engineers that we're working with. So for, there's several examples for that, but if you want to test, let's say you're running a centralized exchange and you want to test a new blockchain integration, you do have to figure out how to set up all the software that's been built across different parts of the organization. It's you gotta be a DevOps person that learns from reading source code and then fixes mistakes. It's basically how you have to do it. So that is the biggest pain point when it comes to the infrastructure level folks. can't speak too well to the smart contract side of things, but I do know that there's a lot of interest in increased observability into bugs, and also increased like capacity to manipulate either like block times or like gas prices, and like how well can you make sure that what you're doing actually holds up under volatile network conditions.
Yeah. All right, yeah, well, thank you so much. So I think we'll call it. So this has been Subnet Show, but if you're interested in hearing more Subnet, you can find us on YouTube and podcast services around the globe. You can find me on Twitter. I'm DAS_Connor, DAS_CONNOR.
Yep, you can find me on Twitter, CG Cardona. We have a lot of great guests coming up. We have Goon, we have Caitlin Long is going to be on the show. We have Tyler Lindholm, who works with Caitlin Long in Wyoming. We've got a bunch of other people signed up, so of course, stay tuned. Thank you so much for your time, Galen. Thank you, Connor. I wish you guys a safe journey back to your home. And I think that's it from the Subnet Show. So as always, from Snowflake to Avalanche and through consensus to the stars. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.